Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So far, we're going to give everybody another minute or a minute and a half before we get started. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have several more join us here as we're getting going. But welcome to Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action's latest webinar in our 2022 series, Health in Our Changing Climate. We're really glad that all of you are able to join us today. And we're very excited about this webinar topic and how it kind of crosses out of our medical field a little bit as health professionals and into the legal lane, but we're very excited to hear about the overlaps in those two different areas. And just a couple of housekeeping notes as we start off. All participants are in listen-only mode. We have a Q&A box feature on the Zoom menu that you can use at any point throughout the presentation to submit questions. So we'll hold those until the last 10 or 15 minutes following the presentation to answer those, but feel free to populate the Q&A throughout if anybody says anything that sparks a question that you'd like answered at the end. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Samantha Duke, Chair of VCCA, for a couple of intro remarks.
Thanks so much, John. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to be hearing about our Children's Trust, from our Children's Trust in Virginia today. I will say that Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action indirectly has been quite engaged with our Children's Trust over the years. Dr. Jerome Paulson submitted, who's one of the VCCA founding members, did submit expert testimony in support of the national case. I myself was a signatory to an amicus brief from public health experts and physicians, also in support of the national case. So we were very excited to learn about our Children's Trust working in Virginia and this case in the Commonwealth. And I just wanted to share with you one of the quotes from the amicus brief from physicians. And it said, the medical community agrees that children in the United States will face compounded health harms over the course of their lives if our current trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions continues. Without significant intervention, this new era will come to define the health of an entire generation. So pediatricians and physicians have been supportive of this work for years now, and we are as well in Virginia. So with that, I'll pass it along to Nate Bellinger to give us a little bit more about the speakers.
Great, thank you so much, and for having us today, and for all the support from VCCA and individual physicians over the years. It's been really meaningful for the cases, but hopefully we can continue that in Virginia as well. My name is Nate Bellinger. I am a senior staff attorney at our Children's Trust and one of the lawyers working on the Virginia case. And I'm going to start it off. We can just do really quick introductions, and then I'm going to pull up some slides and we have a little presentation to walk through. But before I do that, we can just do quick introductions. Kimberly, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, thank you, Nate. My name's Kimberly Willis. I'm a staff attorney at Our Children's Trust and also one of the attorneys with the privilege to represent the 13 really amazing youth plaintiffs in our Virginia lawsuit.
Great. And Kat, do you want to just say hi, maybe your age and where you're from?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Kat. I'm from Blacksburg, Virginia, and I'm 18 years old.
Thank you, Kat. And Tyreek?
Hello, I'm Tyreek. I'm 15 from Roanoke.
And Layla?
Hi, I'm Layla. I'm 17. I'm from Vienna.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here today. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, how does that look?
I think we can see your notes, Nate.
Is that better?
If you go down to the bottom and just click the slideshow button, that might.
How about that?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, so we kind of did our introductions. So I guess just to start a little bit more about Our Children's Trust. So Our Children's Trust is a nonprofit law firm, and we're based in Eugene, Oregon, although we have lawyers in several different states around the country, and we partner with lawyers all over the country, all over the world, and we represent youth all over the country as well. And you can see here the three kind of guiding principles that underline the work that we do. And the first is that we advocate for and elevate the voices of youth and future generations for climate rights. So in all of our cases, the plaintiffs that we represent are youth. And we work really hard both through the courts and through communications campaign to really elevate their voices as much as possible and have them be the face and the center of these cases. The second point is we advocate for science-based and legally enforceable systemic remedies in court. And so science-based, obviously we work closely with climate scientists, and those are some of the scientists that we've worked most closely with from the very beginning. But as the years went on, we realized more and more how important the health impacts of climate change were as well. And so now that science is continuing to evolve, and that we work really closely now with many scientists, including public health experts as well. And when I mean systemic remedies in court, we don't bring challenges to individual power plants, for example, or individual pipelines, but the remedies that we seek are systemic in the sense that we're trying to go after the entire energy system of a state or a country and really bring about coordinated systemic change away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy resources. And then the third point is our cases are based on protecting fundamental human rights. And by that, I mean primarily constitutional rights, public trust rights, and we'll talk more about that in the context of Virginia. But that's really important for our goal of securing durable and lasting solutions to the climate crisis that can't be undone by executive, changes from one administration to the next, or even legislative changes. So we try to secure those durable and lasting climate solutions. You can see here some of the states where we either have active cases or have recently had active cases. Layla H in Virginia is on there. we just yesterday actually filed a case in Hawaii, so that we need to update this map. And we also recently filed a case in Utah. So a couple that aren't on here, and we're always have more in the works as well. And then I'm not going to talk about it today, but we also have a case pending against the federal government. That's our Juliana v. United States case. That's kind of a whole nother conversation that we could talk about all day, but just wanted to mention that's ongoing as well and pending in the District Court of Oregon. And Dr. Paulson is one of our experts in that case. Okay, so turning to Virginia, this is the case brought against the Commonwealth of Virginia by 13 plaintiffs. And this Virginia lawsuit alleges that the defendants, which include the Commonwealth of Virginia, the governor, the Virginia Department of Energy, and the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, have for decades implemented a policy and practice of approving permits for fossil fuel infrastructure in the Commonwealth of Virginia, including permits for the production, transport, and burning of fossil fuels. And we've alleged that this government permitting of fossil fuel infrastructure is leading to dangerous greenhouse gas pollution, which then causes and contributes to climate change and is resulting in really significant injuries to the 13 plaintiffs in this case. And this fossil fuel permitting is both historic and ongoing, so it's continuing to this day. And importantly, the Commonwealth of Virginia has acknowledged that climate change is an urgent and pressing challenge, and that swift decarbonization of the energy sector is necessary to respond to the urgency of the challenges posed by climate change. But the fact is, in Virginia, still over 80% of the energy comes from fossil fuels. So despite this acknowledgement, the government continues to promote and perpetuate this fossil fuel energy system. And so the complaint, I should mention this, the case was filed in February, this past February, and the complaint provides detailed allegations about how climate change is the climate impacts that are being experienced in Virginia and by the youth plaintiffs, including rising temperatures, sea level rise, more frequent extreme weather events, increased incidences of vector-borne illnesses like Lyme disease, and then again, really details how each of the 13 plaintiffs in this case are experiencing those climate impacts. And I won't go into that because you will get to hear directly from some of them about those climate impacts. And then in terms of the claims, the claims are grounded in Virginia's state constitution and public trust doctrine, and Kimberly will talk a little bit more about the specific details of those claims in a minute. So in terms of what we are asking for from the court in the case, we have challenged two specific provisions of the Virginia Gas and Oil Act that explicitly call for the Commonwealth of Virginia to maximize the exploration, development, and production of coal, oil, and gas resources. And so we've argued that in the midst of this ongoing climate crisis, to have laws on the books that call for the increasing use and development of fossil fuels is unconstitutional. So we've challenged those provisions of the statute. And then also we're asking the court to declare that that Virginia's kind of historic and ongoing policy and practice of permitting fossil fuels is impairing the plaintiffs' jus publicum or public trust rights and violates their constitutional rights to life, liberty, and property. So seeking declaratory relief. And then relatedly, also we've left open the possibility for injunctive relief. And what that would mean would be to stop the Commonwealth from say, issuing additional permits for fossil fuel infrastructure. And I just want to underscore really how important it is for the courts to get involved in these types of cases, especially when you have a situation, as we do in Virginia and in other jurisdictions as well, where the political branches, they know of the dangers of climate change, but they act in a way that continues to actually perpetuate the climate crisis. And so in a situation like that, where the political branches are affirmatively causing harm to the plaintiffs, it's really important for the courts to step in and act as a check on the political branches. And so, remember, and we don't have a true democracy in the sense that our political branches can do whatever they want, but we have a constitutional democracy. And so what the political branches do cannot violate constitutional rights. Their conduct must be constitutionally compliant. And when they are acting in a manner that violates constitutional rights, the courts have a duty to step in and protect the rights, the constitutional rights of plaintiffs bringing the cases. And really only the courts in our three-part system of government, it's only the courts that have the authority to determine and decide whether the political branches are acting in a constitutionally compliant manner. Those determinations aren't left up to the political branches, and they don't depend on the outcome of elections. It's really only the courts that can make those decisions. And so with that, I will turn it over to Kimberly to talk a little bit more about the claims in the case.
Yeah, and as Nate mentioned, one of the claims that these young people are bringing is that the Commonwealth is violating their public trust rights, or as Virginia often likes to call it, the jus publicum. And the public trust is a doctrine that forbids Virginia from substantially impairing certain natural resources so that the public can continue to use them. And historically, water resources have been recognized as protected under the public trust doctrine. And our case argues that the atmosphere is also one of the natural resources within the public domain that is protected by Virginia's public trust doctrine. And one of the areas that we get support for that argument is the Virginia Constitution itself. So in Article 11, Section 1 of the Virginia Constitution, the Conservation Article, it says that it's the Commonwealth's policy to protect its atmosphere, lands and waters from pollution, impairment, or destruction for the benefit, enjoyment, and general welfare of the people of the Commonwealth. And our historical research shows that this was added to the Virginia Constitution in 1971 to really embody the extent of the public trust doctrine in Virginia. And also because Virginians anticipated that environmental destruction would be one of the fundamental problems they would face in the future. The drafters of this amendment said its purpose was to ensure Virginians would have a good life, dignity, and a place that they could pass on to future generations with satisfaction and pride. And these youth plaintiffs are the future generations that Virginians in 1971 had the foresight to protect. Yet, as Nate described, the historic and ongoing actions of Virginia's government that are exacerbating climate change, that pollute and destabilize the atmosphere, are violating the youth plaintiffs' public trust rights. And the actions we're talking about in Virginia is specifically the conduct that the state engages in that helps the fossil fuel industry. So this case isn't simply about Virginia not doing enough to combat climate change. This is about Virginia's active and ongoing role in supporting the fossil fuel industry. And Virginia does this by permitting the exploration and extraction of coal and gas. They also permit the construction and operation of gas and oil pipelines and fossil fuel power plants. In the last 2 years alone, Virginia has approved over 82 new permits for fossil fuel extraction and infrastructure projects, when we know from consulting with our experts that no additional fossil fuel infrastructure is needed to meet Virginia's current or future energy needs. And these fossil fuel companies can only operate in Virginia because the Commonwealth has allowed them to through granting these permits that directly lead to more greenhouse gas emissions that fuel the climate crisis. And as Nate mentioned, 80% of the energy consumed in Virginia is generated by fossil fuels. And this has not changed in the past 30 years, which is why these young people are turning to the courts to hold their government accountable for its active role in exacerbating the climate crisis and putting their lives and their futures in peril. And with that, I'm excited for you to have an opportunity to hear directly from 3 of our youth plaintiffs today, Layla, Tyreek, and Kat. And I'd like to start by asking Layla, can you share how the climate crisis has affected you and why you're suing your government?
Sure. So essentially, in terms of health-related impacts, my greatest impacts have definitely been in the realm of like temperature and heat, in terms of the crazy weather we've also been having lately. So around June of 2021, I started experiencing pretty bad, I think it was at first, it was heat exhaustion. Due to increasing temperatures in my area. It was pretty sudden. I had been taking a 5-minute walk outside. It was during virtual classes. It was just one afternoon. And I started to feel some pinpricks across my chest that kind of felt like tiny little needles were stabbing me. And it was a lot more painful than I do describe. And so I felt the need to come back inside, but it didn't let up. It was kind of relentless. It lasted for 30 minutes to an hour. I started freaking out because it was pretty painful, and it also kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think heat rash is something that's pretty commonly described in terms of like health impacts of climate change, but I had just recently experienced this episode and I really had no idea what was going on. So I decided to take a cold shower, and it still did not let up for another good 10 minutes. I remember feeling really dizzy, sweaty. I'd almost stopped sweating, which is a pretty bad sign. I know clinicians will understand that's a pretty bad sign. As soon as you stop sweating, that's like indicative of heat strokes. I'm really glad I got out of that situation. But I just know that with increasing temperatures, as they've been climbing pretty rapidly recently over the past couple of years, I know that incidents like this are not few and far between, and whether or not we have a word to describe them in the time being, they're pretty severe, they're pretty dangerous, and they can impair cognitive abilities, they can cause physical pain. Recently, actually, I just had my high school graduation yesterday in DC, and it was so hot that I felt like I was about to faint. And I knew a couple of people that I was graduating with as well felt like they were about to faint, and it was pretty crazy. Along with that, about a week or so ago, my sister's bridal shower was outdoors, and the forecast had said light rain at around 5, so we were like, okay, we'll pack up and we'll be fine by 5. But it ended up actually hailing like fragments the size of golf balls almost. And they left a couple of bruises on my family and I. And it was a little scary because that day had also been 95 degrees. So the way that the weather is super unpredictable is actually pretty dangerous, because seemingly like harmless weather patterns can actually turn into pretty dangerous things for people, especially in Virginia. And I'm in Northern Virginia, so I really have no idea how bad it gets in Southern Virginia. But yeah.
And Layla, why have you decided to sue your government?
Well, I'm still 17, so I can't vote. And by the time I got involved with Our Children's Trust, I was in the midst of like researching climate justice and climate change on my own terms. I'd been involved with a couple of clubs at my school, and after my incident, I was pretty mad about the sudden changes in our weather. I also, this is news, I don't think Nate and Kimberly know this, but I just passed my NREMT exam. So I'm an EMT now. And the past year or so, I've been training and doing ride-alongs, and I've noticed these weather patterns. And I know that a lot of EMTs operate outside and have to deal with a lot of the crazy things going on, rain or shine. We have to be there and help people. So I know that the increasing temperatures and unpredictable weather patterns can actually cause a lot of harm. So.
Thank you so much, Layla. And Tyreek, can you share with us as well how the climate crisis has affected you and why you're suing your government?
Yes, the climate crisis has impacted me, my health by taking my ability for me to eat the things and do the enjoys I do. Because about 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with alpha-gal syndrome, which is an allergy to red meats, and so like things like pork and beef, and that like took away like my ability to like just eat that and enjoy the things that I do, because it's a big thing in my family, and sometimes we're going out. Especially the first couple of months, we really had to adjust to my new eating habits because it depends on like the severity can depend like what you're eating or the type of stuff you're eating too. And so like sometimes you forget and accidentally give me something I'm allergic to. So we have to go to like a new place and buy the food that I had. And these ticks, I was bit by an black leg tick that can cause alpha-gal syndrome. And these usually go away during the winter, but due to the rise of temperature, they're staying around longer than they usually do. And then I'm also really allergic to a lot of trees in my environment. And so the pollen is affecting me by like me sneezing and like coughing and like sometimes having allergic reactions. Like my face is a little bit puffy, I'm really itchy and stuff like that. And the pollen is being produced earlier in the year. And so it's sticking around longer, and the allergy season is a little bit more difficult for a lot of people. I'm suing my government because I'm under 18, as Layla was saying, and I deserve to be able to do the things that I enjoy outdoors. And it's difficult to do when the temperatures are rising and people are participating in climate change. And so I cannot vote out the politicians who are doing this. And so I'm participating in this case so I can make a difference.
Thank you, Tyreek. And Kat, can you also share with us how the climate crisis has affected you and why you're suing your government?
Yeah, and so my case is a little bit similar to Layla's in that it's mainly centered around the fact that the summers are getting a lot hotter. And so, as Virginia continues to approve fossil fuel permitting and the burning of fossil fuels keeps increasing our global temperatures, I'm finding it, again, much harder to do the things that I love to do. So I've always really liked to be outdoors, and I play two sports. I play soccer and I run track, and I'm finding it really, really hard to get out and do these activities that I love. I love hiking and kayaking, and I haven't really been able to do those, but I've been especially seeing these impacts when I am playing sports. And so playing in kind of an early fall season and a late spring season, um, oftentimes my games are upwards of 80 degrees, sometimes even 90 degrees, and I'm finding it really hard to compete. And often, having somewhat dangerous symptoms when I'm on the field. So I frequently have to, come off the field, feeling nauseous or really dizzy. Sometimes I have trouble seeing because it's hard to breathe. And then I also have sports-induced asthma. And so those symptoms, which already make it difficult to compete, are further exacerbated by the high temperatures and will only get worse as the air quality worsens from burning fossil fuels. And so I just worry that I'm already having so much difficulty, playing sports, being outside, feeling nauseous in the heat. And I just know that those will get worse, and that'll get worse not only for me, but for all the people around me and for the generations to come as well. And so I decided, to sue the Commonwealth because, again, I was tired of them not listening to our concerns. Like Kimberly and Nate mentioned, for the past 30 years, they've known about these concerns and continue to approve fossil fuel permitting and ignored, our pleas. And, again, like Layla and Tyreek mentioned, I only just turned 18, so I haven't been able to vote for the entirety of my life. And so taking this case to the courts ensures that the government has to listen to our case and has to respond. So not only do they hear our concerns, but they have to come up with some sort of response, some sort of action. And so it really is just a way to ensure that our voices are heard.
Thank you, Kat, and thank you all for sharing with us. And we'll turn back to you for one more question in a couple of minutes. And first, I did want to mention that as part of our cases, we conduct a lot of research into the physical and the mental health impacts of climate change and how those are disproportionately impacting the youth plaintiffs that we represent and all of the youth in the world. Because their bodies are still growing and developing and changing, they're more vulnerable to these impacts. They're less able to regulate their body temperature. As you heard from Layla, Tyreek, and Kat, they're outdoors more and they enjoy being outdoors and have a lot of concerns about how climate change will impact their ability to, practice their professions, like Layla's passion for her EMT, and to enjoy the recreational activities. And these impacts start when children are a fetus. They continue through infancy, childhood, and adolescence as they remain vulnerable, especially to heat waves, which are the most common climate impact in children. And mental health is also a very concerning impact of climate change. There was a survey conducted last year of 10,000 16 to 25-year-olds, and the vast majority reported suffering from climate anxiety because they were so worried and concerned about what their future is going to look like. 45% of those participants said their feelings about climate change impacted their daily lives, and 65% said that their governments are failing young people. And as part of this research, Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action's work has been really helpful for our case, including their February 2022 heat illness report. That's really useful evidence for us because we have to prove in our case that the youth plaintiffs are being injured by climate change. So this report that shows temperatures are continuing to increase, what the health impacts are from it, and the importance of addressing climate change as a solution to these ongoing health issues is really helpful for us to prove to the judge what is happening to these youth plaintiffs could have been prevented and needs to be addressed through systemic change going forward. And heat in Virginia has become such a large issue that the Commonwealth passed a law in April mandating the Department of Education publish guidelines by August to educate coaches and student athletes like Kat on heat-related illness. And even hearing from the plaintiffs themselves today, you can see how each of them has been impacted by the increasing heat in Virginia. And I'd like to turn back to Kat, Layla, and Tyreek and ask you if we could start with Kat. Could you tell us something that you love about growing up in Virginia and something that gives you hope for the future?
Yeah, and so definitely something that I love about growing up in Virginia is just, how beautiful the environment is, how many opportunities we have to be outdoors. I can drive 15 minutes from my house and go on a 5-mile hike or, go kayaking on the river. And so I love that we have all these opportunities for this natural beauty and to enjoy all of it. And I love that there are so many communities in Virginia centered around that, people who also love to spend time outdoors, and then also people who are really, really passionate about keeping our environment safe. And so that's definitely something that gives me a lot of hope, is just seeing how much support we get, how many fellow youth, but also fellow adults, people in my community, but also across Virginia and across the United States who are so passionate about climate change and who are willing to support me and my fellow plaintiffs in making this case a success, and then, attacking the climate crisis from so many angles. So I think knowing that we're not alone is what brings me the most comfort.
Thank you, Kat. And Tyreek, can you share with us something you love about growing up in Virginia and what gives you hope for the future?
Yes. One thing I love about Virginia is the beautiful scenery. Like Kat was saying, I'm a big fan of the trees that we have, especially during the fall. And I like visiting my like local mountains and going to the top and just like admiring the view. But because of climate change and the extreme weather conditions, like such as thunderstorms, they're causing the trees to be destroyed. And also, climate change has caused some tree species to move to different places that they're not used to, and it ruins the environment, and it's not good for the scenery. But one thing that does give me hope in this battle is that there are other people out there who are cheering for us, and that this generation and beyond who are living through it will be prompted to try to fight for their rights, because they don't want to go through this in the future. They want to be able to do the things they enjoy, and so they want to fight for their rights.
Thanks, Tyreek. And Layla, what do you love about growing up in Virginia and what gives you hope for the future?
I honestly agree with everything that's been said, because I personally really love the greenery as well. I love knowing that, like nature is right outside my backyard and is in most people's backyards in Virginia. It's kind of unavoidable, but it's something that we grow to love. Like ever since I was a kid, I've been, playing with like the wildlife out there. We have deer, we have ants, we have all different kinds of insects and birds. And seeing lately that, especially in my backyard, I have a lot of nature and a lot of greenery, and again, like a lot of wildlife. Seeing some of the changes in my own backyard has been kind of discouraging. But again, knowing that there are so many people who are supporting us and believe that we're on, like, I guess, the right side of history is really encouraging. And not only that, but knowing that we have this avenue that we could pursue. That's a way to hold our government accountable, and individual people who are benefiting from fossil fuel infrastructure is really encouraging, because climate change and climate change justice can be a really isolating thing without the help of many. It takes a village, honestly. It takes more than a village, but for right now, like seeing that we have even a village is really encouraging.
Thank you, Layla. Thank you all for sharing that. And, I just want to emphasize that we represent youth like Tyreek and Kat and Layla because they are powerless and the least to blame for the climate crisis. And you can see on these slides some of the other youth plaintiffs in Virginia that we also represent. And all of these youth are suffering the consequences of older generations' decisions to continue to rely on a fossil fuel energy system, to the point that today's children will live through 3 times as many climate disasters as their grandparents. And for those of you curious about the current status of the lawsuit Layla H. versus Commonwealth of Virginia, as Nate mentioned, we launched the case in February of this year. In April, the Commonwealth filed a demur, which is a legal document that lists the reasons that they think the court shouldn't even hear the case. For example, one of their arguments is that the plaintiffs have no standing, which includes an injury. They don't believe that we have sufficiently alleged that the youth plaintiffs are injured by climate change, which really just underlines the importance of VCCA's work and our experts' work in proving that climate change is impacting these youth plaintiffs. They've also alleged that the court can't do anything to help the youth plaintiffs, which we know is not true. As Nate mentioned, the court can issue a declaration stating that they have these constitutional rights and that they are being violated. And the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, would be guided by that court declaration and bound to abide by it in the future. So the next steps in our case as we address the demur are there's going to be briefing in the coming months, and on September 16th in the Richmond City Circuit Court in front of Judge Jenkins, all of the attorneys will be advocating for their positions in the courtroom, and we will certainly be advocating that these children deserve their day in court and for their case to be heard. And I'll turn it back over to Nate, who can share more about how to support the case and these youth plaintiffs.
Great. Thanks, Kimberly and Layla and Kat and Tyreek for sharing all of that. Before touching more specifically about Virginia, one thing that I just wanted to mention, if you haven't heard about it already, I mentioned at the beginning the federal case Juliana v. United States. There is now a film. It's been out for a little while, but recently it's available on Netflix called Youth v. Gov, which follows that case and really highlights the experiences and the climate impacts of the 21 youth plaintiffs in that case. So if you are curious in learning more about the federal case and watching a really exceptionally well done film about that, you can check out Youth v. Gov on Netflix. And then in terms of the Virginia case, so Dr. Adut mentioned at the beginning amicus briefs. And so that's kind of the technical term. Friend of the court is another way we refer to them. And those can be filed by interested parties that want to support, in this case, the plaintiffs in the case. And we have had some really, really exceptionally well done amicus briefs filed in our federal case and in other cases by public health experts. And that's a really, really helpful way to really explain to the court about more details than sometimes we might be able to do in our briefing, which have really tight page limits oftentimes. Raise additional issues and educate the court about how climate change is harming children in particular. So that's one option. It's always great op-eds about whether it's related to the case or just continuing to raise awareness about the impacts of climate change and particularly the health impacts to children. And again, Kimberly mentioned some of the important research that's being done by some of you all, I'm sure, on this call and others, and how that research really and data is really helpful for our cases to show how young people are being impacted by climate change, and really to show how they're being uniquely impacted by climate change and how the impacts to children are different than they are to adults, and how because of their youth, they will, children are growing up in this world with worsening climate change, and those health impacts are affecting them today, and in some cases can really result in lifelong impacts. So that ongoing research and data is very helpful for us. And then I'm sure there are other ideas out there that you all may have too. So we're always welcome to other suggestions that you all might have. And if anybody is interested in learning more about any of these options and timing, you feel free to reach out to me or Kimberly. You can see our email addresses here. And I think with that, I will just say thank you again for having us and turn it over to any questions that people might have.
Thanks.
Stop sharing.
Thanks so much, Nate. I know that Sam wanted to jump in before we turn to Q&A real quick.
I just wanted to thank you all so much, and I'm so glad that you are doing this in Virginia. It's so important. I think it's that your voices are heard as young people, and this seems to be a critical way to express the vulnerability of young people to climate change and the right for climate action. And I think we do have an interesting question here. And I was wondering about this myself. What is the penalty of violating the amendment that was listed to the Constitution. And I guess I also wondered, like, if I didn't quite understand why harm to the plaintiffs would be necessary if it's clear that the amendment is being violated through climate change. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I'll start with that and then get to the kind of the second part about the penalty for violating the amendment. So harms to there's a couple reasons why we need to show harms to plaintiff, and one of them is that in order for plaintiffs to be able to bring a lawsuit, they need to have what's called standing in our court system. And that's kind of a procedural hurdle in some ways that the courts have put up to make sure that not anybody at any time can sue anybody at any time. So in order to be a plaintiff in a lawsuit, you need to have standing. And one of the requirements of standing is you have to be injured. And so that's an important reason why we need to show and prove how the plaintiffs are being harmed by climate change. We need to show that they've been injured in some way. Another part of standing is we need to show that who we're suing, in this case the government, has caused or at least partially caused those injuries. And then the third part is redressability, and that we need to show that there's something that the courts can do about the injuries that the plaintiffs are experiencing. And so, yeah, so that's really an important part of why we need to show that the plaintiffs have been injured, why we need to show that the government's conduct is responsible for causing these injuries, and then we need to show that, again, the court can do something about these injuries. And the law is pretty clear that you don't need to 100% alleviate these injuries. Any order that can make the injuries a little bit better is sufficient for the purposes of standing. And so obviously, Virginia is not solely responsible for causing climate change. We could never prove that, and we haven't alleged it. But we do think that there is enough evidence to show that over the years, and based on the ongoing actions, Virginia's actions are continuing to exacerbate climate change, which is causing additional and worsening harms to the plaintiffs. In terms of what the penalty is for violating the amendment, so we're not, the penalty that, there's no penalty unless you don't seek a penalty. Unless somebody sues them. And so that's kind of what we've done. We've sued them to incur some kind of a penalty. And as Kimberly and I kind of alluded to, the relief that we're seeking, or the penalty, is this declaratory relief and injunctive relief. We're not seeking any types of financial damages. A lot of times, people sue somebody to recoup kind of financial damages. That's not this type of case. We're not trying to get money from the state. What we're really trying to do is get declaratory relief and have the court declare that the state is violating the plaintiff's constitutional rights. And that declaratory relief is really critical in many constitutional cases. And one of the most, one example that we refer to sometimes is the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case, where the court declared that school segregation was unconstitutional. That was the first step, that declaratory relief. And then the injunctive relief comes in terms of how do you solve the problems? How do you address school segregation? Or in this case, how do you decarbonize Virginia's energy system? And so usually you get that declaratory relief first. The expectation is governments will adhere to the declaratory relief and start to follow the court's orders. If they don't, we can continue to put pressure on the government through that injunctive relief, where we can seek specific requests such as, no more permits for fossil fuel infrastructure. So the penalty is really that declaratory relief and injunctive relief remedy that we're seeking in the case.
Thank you very much. We had oh, this is just the website. I had another question. In terms of the timeline, is the September 16th court perhaps hearing, I'm not sure that's the technical term, is that a critical event where you would want support before that? So amicus briefs should be filed before that, or op-eds should be filed before that, or something like that?
Yeah, so the September 16th hearing is a significant event in the case, and that hearing. So as Kimberly mentioned, there will be written briefs and then a hearing, and after that hearing, the judge will either say basically, you have a viable case, and we can continue to really the evidentiary stage where we would gather all of the factual evidence, the expert reports, and get ready for a trial. And so that hearing in part will help us decide whether we can get to trial. And so amicus briefs, there may be an opportunity to file amicus briefs before then. We'll have to get back to you about that. But certainly helping to raise awareness about the hearing through op-eds. People can attend the hearing. I'm not sure if it'll be available for streaming or if it's something that people have to be in person at. We can try and figure out those details. But yeah, that will definitely be a pretty important event in the case, and it would be really helpful to raise awareness and to ensure that the court, understands kind of the importance of this case, and that, it's important to allow this case to proceed to a trial where we could really present all of this evidence in court.
Thank you. I see we have another question. Yeah, so how does from Dr. Y, how does the shift of political climate every few years affect the timeline or a judicial approach? Oh, and there's another question too, which I'll get to after that from Tracy Kelly.
Yeah, so I think the changing in political climates really underscores the need for judicial intervention, because what we can do when we seek remedies in courts that are based on protecting fundamental constitutional rights, if we got a order from the court in Virginia or any other state requiring that the state, take actions to protect the plaintiff's constitutional rights and begin decarbonizing its energy sector in order to protect constitutional rights, because it's based on the Constitution and not statute or executive action, it would bind the current and subsequent administrations. And that's really important, because when we do see progress sometimes happening on climate change, oftentimes it's done by executive action, whether that was under President Obama or under a governor, or sometimes even legislation. But that can be quickly undone by subsequent administrations and even be undone by subsequent legislation. So when you get these court orders tiered to protecting constitutional rights, those will be binding on multiple administrations. And so that really underscores and highlights why it's really important to get those judicial orders based on protecting constitutional rights, because we can't continue to kind of go back and forth. In order to address climate change, we need kind of these long-term plans.
Thank you. And Tracy Kelly asked, is there any way to use injury or wrongful death suits as a result of particulate matter or air pollution leading to prematurity or stillbirth, how much direct research into cause is needed? How definitive would that need to be?
Yeah, so I think that kind of gets at the causation issue. You know, we have to be able to show that the PM or air pollution was at least a factor. It doesn't necessarily need to be the only factor in the injury or premature death. I think there is, I mean, you all would probably know better than me, but I think there is growing evidence that could support that type of case. And we actually have the case in Virginia or in Utah, actually, where there is really, really poor air quality in some parts of the state, really highlights the health injuries and how it's actually taking years off of people's lives from the air pollution, from the PM. So I think that there is yeah, that's certainly part of our approach in Utah. And I think, you know, so when you have fossil fuels, there's kind of the fossil fuels and climate change and climate impacts and those injuries. But I do think there is also another component of that, which is the more immediate air pollution caused by the burning of fossil fuels, harming people in those, near those areas. And so I do think there is an approach viability there. Hopefully we can do that in Utah.
I did have a request to hear a little bit more about our Children's Trust cases in Africa or Pakistan.
So I'm not sure I can answer that. I'm sorry. I know we do have cases going, or we work with lawyers in different parts of the world on different cases. But I couldn't tell you off the top of my head the status of those. But we do have a link on our website to different, both kind of our website is broken up by our federal case, our state cases, and then our global cases. So there might be more information there on the international cases. Sorry, I don't have that answer at my fingertips.
And Dr. Y mentioned how, with the potential overturn of Roe v. Wade, are there in fact measures that would need to be taken to ensure that judicial decisions are not undone? I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just need to continue to be persistent and vigilant in bringing these cases and educating the courts about the harms to the plaintiffs. We are constantly monitoring cases coming out of the Supreme Court and state courts, and those are always informing the way we file our cases and argue our cases. That's a very concerning development coming out of the Supreme Court, to put it mildly. But I think we just kind of need to continue to persist and move forward and do what we can to hold our courts accountable for their decisions. The state courts are often quite a bit different than federal courts in terms of how judges are put on the bench and whether or not they have lifetime tenure. So in some ways there can be more accountability for the judges in state courts than in federal courts, where it's very hard there's very few checks on what the federal judges can do. But yeah, we'll just kind of keep bringing our cases, and hopefully we can get some wins and And once we get those decisions to be implemented, hopefully the benefits will be so clear and apparent to everybody that even the courts won't want to undo them.
Well, I think we're at time now, and thank you all so much for taking the time to speak with us. And I do look forward over the next few months to discussing how we at VCCA, our members and partners, can support your work in the months ahead. And I just want to really also thank Layla and Tyreek and Kat for your bravery in doing this work. It's not easy as a young person to get involved in these types of legal cases. So I commend you all for being brave, and thank you. So thank you all again so much, and we look forward to being in touch in the months ahead.
Thank you.